think that God is obligated to receive your worship? Something that we have little reflection on, I think, in the church today. Is there such a thing as worship of God that he doesn't want? Worship of God, we think we're worshiping him and he doesn't want it. He doesn't receive it. This is what he does with Cain. Like Cain probably thinks, I'm giving something to God. And then God says, no. And his face fell. Now, it has to be right out of the gate here. Sometimes people think that God's just being arbitrary. He's being petty. He's being capricious with Cain. And that's not true. When he sees that Cain is angry, he asks Cain this question. Verse 6, the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? And why is your face fallen? If you do well, okay, there's the key. If you do well, will you not be accepted? What do you think the answer to that question is? If you do well, won't you be accepted? Yes. But if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. So the problem here is not that God is being arbitrary, but in some way, Cain is not doing well. Cain is not doing something that his brother Abel is doing. So what is that something? Well, there's two clues. First, the story notes and tells us that Abel brought, quote, the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. So this is an emphatic, redundant statement. Whereas Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground. So there's an emphasis. Some people think, oh, it's because Abel brought a blood sacrifice and Cain didn't. That is not the problem here. First, later in the Torah, God says an animal sacrifice is fine, a grain sacrifice is fine. Like this, that's not what's going on here. But what is going on, though, is that there's a clear emphasis on the quality of Abel's offering that is conspicuously missing from the description of Cain's offering. So Abel, he offers the best of his animals. He brings to God the best of what he's got, which, if you know anything about how animals work and genetics and all of this, if you want to have the healthiest, most robust, best flock that you can have of animals, what do? Well, you would take the best ones and you have those ones breed, right? Because now you have the best bloodline that you can have in your herd. So what if you take the best ones and you kill them? Well, you are, hypothetically at least, you're diminishing the quality of your herd. You're diminishing the quality of your flock. You're actually taking a hit there. So when Abel, this is the whole idea in the Old Testament, when people are told that you have to bring your very best to God, what it is an act of trust. It is an act of faith. It's saying, God, if I take the best of what I've got, I feel like if I invested it how I think I should, then I could do pretty well for myself. But I'm going to take the very best of what I have and I will give it to you. And I will trust that you will take care of me. You will provide for me. You will do right by me. I'll give you the best of what I've got. Yes? Does this concept make sense? So Abel demonstrates trust in God. Cain, however, offers to God some fruit of the ground. And again, there's nothing wrong with offering God grain, but the text does not tell us that Cain demonstrated the same actual love for God and trust in God that Abel did. And the New Testament authors understood it this way. The book of Hebrews says it like this, in this so-called hall of fame of faithful people. Hebrews chapter 11. It's a whole list of people in the Old Testament who had faith in God, and then we should have faith like them. And so, verse 4, by faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain. Now, how did he do that? By faith. So, the inspired New Testament writers understood that what's going on with Cain and Abel is that Abel has faith and gives an offering of faith, and Cain doesn't have faith. And so he gives an offering that's not about faith. And God commended him by accepting his gifts, and through his faith, though he died, he still speaks. Now, secondly, when Cain's offering was not regarded by God, he got angry. At whom, may I ask? At whom did he get angry? At himself? Not himself. His anger is directed at God and his brother. In other words, he is unwilling to entertain the idea that maybe he is the problem. Do you see that? God himself says to Cain, I don't like what you have. And Cain, rather than, okay, just to put this in like such simple terms, if God himself wrote a message in the clouds to you, and he says, you've got some problems you need to deal with, it'd be like you get angry about that and you're like, the problem's not me. Okay, but God himself is saying that it is. So you have here the example of a person, like no one can correct them. You know anybody like this? Do you know anybody where you're just absolutely convinced, even if God himself were to stand in front of this person and tell them that they're wrong, they wouldn't buy it? They wouldn't do it. And we literally see this in Cain. Cain's standing there, and God says, if you do well, will you not be accepted? And Cain is just fundamentally unwilling to entertain that he's the problem. It's like he feels that he is just entitled to success, to favor, to the receiving of his offering. And when his offering's not received, he thinks the problem lies outside of himself. And this is where we see a window into, this is just Cain's idolatry. John tells us in the book of 1 John in the New Testament that Cain's deeds were evil and that he was, quote, of the evil one. He says in 1 John chapter 3 and verse 12, we should not be like Cain, who was of the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own deeds were evil and his brother's righteous. So John sees Cain's offering as really an evil deed. And so Cain, even in his outward worship of God, he's putting down an offering for God. And the New Testament writers still say, no, but he was of the evil one. And so Abel's offering came out of faith and an actual love for God and trust in him. But the problem is that what Cain's offering is really about Cain. What does this mean for us?